I'm lucky. I do what I love and love what I do. I started a nonprofit along with some other close colleagues and friends. I believe it was 2014, 2015. And that nonprofit has grown and is almost completely run by volunteer help now. It's very low expense, low overhead. We've intentionally designed it that way. And it's completely virtual. We don't use offices. And what we do is we have a site called gatewaygaston.com or .org, whichever you go to. And if somebody goes to our site and they need help connecting with the right resource to meet some kind of human need, maybe they're behind on their rent, maybe they're needing help with a car repair, whatever, we call them back within 90 minutes and help them connect with the right resource with dignity. People were given the same stories over and over and over. And we wanted to prevent some of that and add some dignity to the process. What's happened in turn is that we have gathered tons of data and built scores of relationships with our community of faith and with our service community, social services, nonprofits, and all that. And in the past year and a half, we've spent a lot of time emphasizing what's going well, working to remove duplication of services by getting people to collaborate, and by shining a light on where there are vacuums in the service. So I'll set it up this way. I have a piece coming out this weekend or maybe next, and it says, the title of it is Catching Babies. What's up with catching all these babies? We, in my county, I'm from Gaston County, North Carolina, we catch a lot of babies. Now we're talking metaphorically. But baby falls out a window, we catch it, and we'll talk about it. We'll take pictures and put it on social media. We'll teach a class on it. We'll set up stations to catch babies. But few, if any, people are going upstairs to figure out why babies are falling out the window in the first place. So we're treating a lot of symptoms in our community, but not a lot of causes. So that's my nonprofit hat. My other hat I wear is I do education and consulting work all around education in the field of what we call cultural competency. That's the capacity and willingness to interact with anybody, anywhere, anytime. Mm-hmm. And I do that for law enforcement, fire, private business, whatever. Leadership, education, all kinds of things. I love it.
That's fantastic.
So that's me.
That's awesome.
From a professional standpoint.
That's awesome. Well, as far as getting into that space, I'm sure you've got some sort of backstory on that. What sort of nudged you in that direction? Because if I'm not mistaken, originally when you started your professional career, you weren't in this at all, right?
Yeah, when I came out of school, and while I was still in school, I had to get a real job. My mom had a surgery. It didn't go well. She was a widowed mom at under 40, maybe 40 at the time. And I had to support myself. So I could either flip burgers or I could build a career. So I built a career in the corporate world, working in the banking, mortgage banking, lending, and honestly had a good career. And we'll talk about it when I talk about depression later, about how during the first 20 years of my career, I was driven. And then I became passionate. There's a big difference. We'll talk about that in another space and time. But right after 9/11, I get a call one day. I was working for Citigroup. I had come off the road from traveling, thought I would be there forever. That was where I was going to retire. That was my plan. And get a call that they're eliminating 1,800 jobs, and mine was one of them. So I had emailed a guy the day before because somebody told me he took short-term mission and philanthropic kinds of trips. He led them to the United Kingdom, and I'd always wanted to go to England.
I remember that. Yeah.
So I emailed him back. I said, look, I met you Sunday briefly, and then you went back to Texas, but I've got some time on my hands. So ended up, he made some connections for me, and then I on my own went to England, met some people, and I went in this little church called Westview in Hartlepool, which is sort of It was a coal mining town and a shipbuilding town in the past, and a working town. And I go into this little church and just found acceptance and love, and ended up going over there, not even as an ordained minister, getting commissioned over there to help them for 6 months, kind of restructure. They had been through a really, really tough separation of a family that was leading the church, the pastor and his wife, and it was tough. There were all kinds of backstories. Been there a lot of years. So basically, I just got to love people, and I got to teach, which I loved doing. And I came back and retooled my education. In the process of that, while I was getting ordained and all that, I worked in a middle school with communities and schools. Loved it. Worked in 2 middle schools primarily. I fell in love with human service, and that was where I migrated. And when I saw the vacuums and the duplication of services, I thought, we can address this. And literally on a cocktail napkin with a guy named Jonathan Schnibbin, we started scribbling, and the rest is history. We served this year we'll serve about 2,000 families. So
that's an awesome, I'll tell you, that's an awesome, I like what you said earlier. And now that you gave that whole story there about how you transitioned over, it makes a lot of sense when you said your drive turned into passion.
Yep.
And passion projects are almost always in either a creative groove or in a helpful groove, like
That's
a
right.
charitable sense.
And no day seems like work.
Yeah.
The only day it seems like work is when I have to do budgets or spreadsheets and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And because we are able to operate at a lean position, we used to need to raise $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
Because we were part of the YMCA for a while. Great organization, but a very, very top-heavy overhead. So the Y and I made a decision, let's spin this thing off.
Yeah.
I now work for them on a volunteer basis as their chaplain, and I love that.
Yeah.
But the overhead didn't match. And so now we can run this thing on $15,000, $18,000 a year, and
wow,
that's nothing.
Efficiency.
Yeah.
And I bet a lot of that has to do with facilities and staff, right? The big overhead costs.
We never need an office because it's all virtual. My key person, the only employee we have, works by the call rather than by the hour.
Gotcha.
And she's on call 8 to 8 Monday or 7 days a week, but she can do other jobs. She delivers. She's retired. She delivers for Walmart and DoorDash. In the meantime, I think Walmart only. During COVID, she was sitting in Florida at her daughter's kitchen, covering the gateway, and nobody ever knew.
Yeah.
You can do it from anywhere. I've done it from my car. I take calls at breaks if I'm teaching. It works. So you don't have the expense of rent. I don't take a salary. I take a small monthly stipend. It's small. We don't have any other employees. We've got some technology expense.
Yeah.
And that's an exciting point. We are upgrading as I speak our technology so that instead of awaiting a call back when you text us or go to our website, waiting 90 minutes for a call back or a text, you'll be able to go to our site. If your locator is on, you won't really need to put anything in except what you're looking for. But most people will put their zip code and what they need. And they may say, I need I need a doctor, and I don't have health insurance. Boom, all the places in their vicinity will pop up with what they need, hours, website, all that.
That's awesome.
And there'll always be a button there that says, big button, that says, if you need a live person, click here, and you'll hear back within 90 minutes. And we will test that. Knock on wood, we'll test it mid-November through the end of the year.
Yeah.
And then pilot it first quarter and then roll it out. My grandson, Landon, he's with me. He's seen some of this firsthand from his background. He was in the foster care system for a long time, just adopted into our family. So we're thrilled about that. But he's lived some of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Which kind of brings us full circle. Yeah. Not everybody we deal with at the Gateway is homeless or unhoused. but they're spiraling toward that often.
Well, it happens fast.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
especially due to
It can happen within a month.
Yeah,
You'll
and
be fine, and 30 days later, 4 unfortunate accidents, a car, a
That's
sickness, and a job injury, all in one 30 or 90-day period, and you're homeless.
And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and the reality is several years ago there was a guy going, I can't remember his name. I have it. We could link it if we need to.
Yeah, we can add it later.
He wrote a book about this, and the average middle class family could not come up with $400 if they had an immediate emergency.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are living closer to the line than we want to admit. And again, our work has put us in our community kind of, I think we would be considered, the Gateway would be considered experts in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
We're a little bit of, we're heavy advocates, and we're just a little bit activist. We're pushing to build collaboration. But people don't like to collaborate in communities like ours because we have a mill mentality.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't want, if you worked in the ABC mill, you didn't want the people in the XYZ mill talking back in the day before, was it NAFTA that took all the jobs away? Before that happened and we started losing all these jobs, they were very isolated, segregated, not just by race, but by demographic of income, things like that. And it's created a very siloed system of care.
Oh, it has.
And it's tough.
And I know from somebody, and look, I make what they consider decent money.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care what they say decent money is, but I would love to see anybody that we vote for, left, right, center, or otherwise, live off of my salary.
Absolutely.
Just
and
live.
your benefits. They got different benefits in D.C. than we got.
Oh, I know.
Oh,
yeah. It's a... Just hang on one second. It's one of those things that I don't think... When you say it's siloed, I think it's more of like it's at levels. The air is different at every level.
Say that again. The air is different?
The air is different at every level.
That's a good way to describe it.
The higher you go, the less air there is, so the less down to earth you are. I don't know if it's sort of silly, but it sort of gets the point across. It's like you don't understand what it's like to try to decide between getting frozen versus fresh vegetables.
That's right.
Because there's a $4 price difference and it's the same vegetable.
You can buy a lot of Little Debbies for that price.
Yes.
Versus one or two. There are ways to do that and to learn that, but they require education. They require mentoring. And what you said about the thinner air at the top, I get to spend time with those people at the top, so to speak. Our health department, our DSS, those people who run that, they are unbelievable people. But they can't, there's just too much work and too many people to keep that imprint going all the way down. And somewhere many times it breaks down. Mm-hmm. It's better than it used to be in our community. And I don't work a lot outside our community in this philanthropic and humanitarian world just because that's where I live.
Well, the problem is so dense, too.
Yeah.
You're not going to run out of work within a 5 square mile radius.
That's exactly right.
You're not. I drove a truck down in Charlotte, Gaston County, all around that area.
Yep.
Starts getting a little greener up towards Davison County.
Right.
SUVs and
that's right.
Artisan shops and polos. You know what I mean? But you go down towards Gaston.
Well,
you better be careful which gas station you pull in.
When you hit New Hope and 321, New Hope's more retail, but when you hit 321 in our community, which is a major thoroughfare, if you're driving the other way of 85 north and south, west of 321 has just been neglected. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, for instance, the school Southwest, been there probably since 78, 76, something like that. A very quality building. It has never, the school board has never seen fit to equip it with a full set of new furnishings. They've always put seconds tier, hand-me-downs, throwaways, unless it's happened in the last year or so, and I didn't know about it. And if they did, that means it took 40 years to make it happen.
Still a problem, yeah.
And those are some of the things. I don't get in too much to the local political thing because I don't want to endorse candidates and all that.
It just gets sticky and it smells bad.
Well, our mayor was told how many people in our community, current mayor, one of our agencies told him how many people they had to help with just their utility bills for the city of Gastonia. And the mayoral response was, you mean we got people in our community who can't pay their power bill? Well, if we're that out of touch, think about going up the line like you talked about. So, that's the challenge. But, and Landon mentioned earlier talking about the unhoused people hanging around the 7-Eleven. That is true.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I kind of watch when I travel. Most of the cities I travel in North Carolina, if there's a QT, there are some picnic-like tables out.
So like sheet stations down
right.
there? Yeah.
Well, at our QT, but next door to the police department, interestingly, they had to remove the tables because people were congregating there and panhandling so hard. And that's a challenge. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but one of the challenges with homelessness in a community is determining how many homeless you have.
Yes.
So that you can figure out a strategic plan for helping them.
Well, funding. Just the basic thing
That's
of funding.
right.
Because each head has a dollar sign above it.
That's right.
I mean, it sounds cold, but
it
at
does.
the end of the day, you have spreadsheets for everything.
And each unaccounted for head means negative dollars because you don't get them.
Yeah.
And they come down from the feds. We get a fair amount of money in our community, but the continuum of care is a federally funded entity that has been like a hot potato in our county. And I suspect in other counties that I've studied, I've seen this. It's multi-county, which is a challenge. 3 counties is a lot to say grace over. But in 8-9 years, it's had like 4 different leadership sets. Our United Way has had probably 7 or 8 key from the top and second line leaders leave in a 10-year period. So the continuity of that work has suffered. Then you do an annual point in time count that is sometimes led by United Way, sometimes led by Continuum. I think currently ours is organized by the Continuum of Care is what it's called. That count is made in January.
Yeah.
We didn't get final numbers this year until late May. Last year it was September when we got them. They have one number. The website has another number because it's supposedly real time. The school system has another number because they calculate homelessness differently.
Yeah.
But the best we can tell in our community, unhoused on the street, they're between 300 and 400 people. And that doesn't count people who are couch surfing or staying with relatives. It doesn't count people who are in the eviction process, nor does it count people who are just a month or 2 away from losing everything.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of people to say grace over. Here's the interesting part. Since the day we started the Gateway, we've tracked who would engage for a hand up, who would take that nibble and do more than just say, I need my light bill paid, I need help with my rent, but would do something towards solving their own problem rather than us just fixing it temporarily.
Contributors.
That's right. And we call it engagement.
Yeah.
You know, the number has never been anywhere except between 17 and 20%. So that means if we have 400 homeless people, 18, 19 maybe % of those are ready to really step forward.
Yeah.
And we can help them because if the caseworkers, the volunteers, the church volunteers, whatever, are working harder than the client, it's a no-win situation.
Yeah.
And then you got the situation with substance use disorder. The system is so broken. And there's such stigma around it. Okay, they have substance use disorder. Let's help them get some help.
Let me ask you about that, especially when it comes to the unhoused. In that sense, you said it was a stigma. Now I know, so I guess psychology plays into it a lot. Do you think that some of that is more of a trust issue that people have with the people that suffer with substance abuse? Because I mean, I've had in my own life friends and family, that's dealt with substance abuse, and the biggest thing is that I've come across when it comes to they're integrating into the family or into a friend group is a trust issue, because so many times that trust has been broken. They're good people.
Yep.
They mean well, and that they're clean.
Yep.
Right? But you have that fear of, are they going to, clean me out one day or whatever.
Right.
Do you think that nagging feeling that creeps in, do you think that plays a part in the way we approach trying to solve the unhoused situation and trying to solve the drug, the sickness of addiction? Like, do you think that plays more than we think?
I think you've hit on an absolute core issue. In our community and in others, Beth Macy writes about this a lot in her book. She's done 2 books. One of them, she talks about Gastonia. I'll think of the names of them in a minute.
Yeah.
She was in our community recently, did a great job speaking. There's a ministry in our community called Olive Branch Ministry. They are a no-harm model of substance use support.
Mm-hmm.
That means if you need a clean needle, they'll get you a clean needle.
Yeah.
Well, that is just anathema in our deeply, deeply evangelical Republican community. A relative of mine worked in the same building with Olive Branch rep for a while, and she said, well, we work under the same umbrella, but I do not approve of what she does.
Yeah. And
my relative was a nurse. The other person was a peer-to-peer specialist.
Mm-hmm.
But you hit on it. There's that, and it's driven often, and I'm a person of faith, but it's driven by our desire in the faith community to fix people. Mm-hmm. First, to fix their soul, which I'll give you an example of that in a minute, and then to fix their problem. What if we just love them and let them and God fix their problems? And when they need rehab or detox, let's help them get it. This week, I talked to a local church. They reached out wanting help. They're going to have, it's an outreach event. It's what it is, trying to fill pews, because pews are empty in a lot of churches. It's in a part of town where a lot of unhoused people congregate in the street. So their big thing they were working on, we got them some coats and things to give away, which is great.
Yeah.
But the big thing they were working on, have you seen these in North Carolina especially? I've seen them, these signs that say Jesus saves, and they look like a political sign. They're that size.
And
they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, this church said, we want to help the homeless. I said, what are you going to do? She said, we're gonna just wallpaper the front of our building and property that day with Jesus saves signs. We have 700 churches and 250,000 people in our community. If they don't know who Jesus is, it's not their fault. It's ours.
If you're in the South and you ain't had an opportunity to go to a church, I don't know what's wrong with you.
But there's no
They're
trust.
on every corner.
There's such low trust there because of that. And because of that, again, I'm on the inside of the church. I honestly believe this, and I think I could prove it if I could share things that aren't shareable. They're confidential. A lot of people seem afraid to get too close to the substance use concern because it hits too close to home. They've got a child that they don't want anybody to know about, or they've got themselves, or they've got a spouse, and they'd rather just not get into that arena because somebody will find out.
Yeah.
So what you said about the trust, you would think that the most trusted entity in a community would be its faith portion.
You want
but it's
that,
not. It's just not anymore. At one time, it seemed to be, but even then, churches are strange places. They're just strange places. In our community, we had people who were told when to get up, when to go to work, a whistle blew, when to take a break, a whistle blew, when to go home, a whistle blew, work overtime, you didn't have any choice, you did it. Our mill owners built and funded churches around their mills to keep people contained, to communicate. And when you made Johnny Smith, who worked a job where he was told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, he paid his rent out of his paycheck because the mill owned the house. He got his food at the company store. He grew a little bit. Every decision was made for him. You make him a deacon or a Sunday school superintendent in a church, he doesn't know how to handle that authority, and it created mayhem in churches historically. So,
well, I will tell you, as you well know, I grew up in church.
Yep. No, you grew up in real church.
I grew up in a cult, but as far as like seeing that side of things, and then going over to the military, and then when I got out of the military, I was in the motorcycle club world for a while.
Yep.
The same issues you have in deacon meetings are the same issues you have in motorcycle club meetings.
Well, we've seen it in volunteer fire departments.
It's got to be the same all the way across the board.
Because people are people. Yeah. But the church claims to have a solution to all that. And
they say they do.
But I don't see it fleshed out in many. That was, again, we'll talk about that in the depression piece, but that was the turning point in my life when I realized it wasn't my job to fix anybody. That's between that person and God. Not me. That takes a lot of pressure off.
Well, it's like trying to take the responsibility of, my wife smokes.
Yeah.
She can't smoke anymore, lung cancer. And
right.
then you take that stress on you every day. You're not going to make her stop. She's going to stop when she wants to.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly
same concept.
Right.
Well, let me ask you one more question on my end, if you don't mind, on the homelessness thing. It's something that's really dominated my thought process about this because, I sit and think about things from time to time. And how would you fix a unhoused situation, especially on a large scale? Like, for instance, in California.
Yeah,
it's out of control. Like, it is insane. You talk about 400 in Gastonia. I mean, it's like 400,000 over a city.
Portland, Seattle, they're all seeing it.
Yeah, and I've listened to some podcasts on this. Of course, every podcast has its own lean, depending on where it falls in the political spectrum. So you get multiple points of view. But everybody that has honest conversations about fixing the unhoused and the open, like, drug abuse scene.
Right.
That's getting so bad everywhere.
Yep.
Is that the bureaucracy around it is choking out the actual flow of help. So when it starts up here, it's a waterfall of funding and planning.
Yep.
And then by the time it gets down to me, the unhoused, right, I get a bag.
That's
and that bag, if I put a cost on it, is as much as a month's pay.
Right.
Right. There was an article I read, and I listened to a couple of podcasts that discussed this article, and it was talking about the cost of housing, temporary housing that they were budgeting for in California in a specific city. I can't remember the name of which city it was.
Right.
But basically, the tiny home program ended up costing, each tiny home was almost $250,000.
Yep.
So that brings the square footage price, so on and so forth.
Right.
I could talk about it for days, but the problem that I'm trying to figure out is, and I'd like to get your view on this, how going forward in your organization with the people you're working with and just in the Gaston County area, how are you guys like planning for that?
Yep.
And how to avoid that, because that's going to choke out inevitably any good that you want to do in the end, I guess.
Absolutely.
How are you guys approaching that? I know you probably are talking about it, but what's your...
There's been a lot of talk
Yeah.
A lot of meetings. I have written about this, and it's being published with our newspaper partnership in the written paper, which many people don't read anymore. I don't, but I do read online, and it's on my Facebook postings and our websites. And we're outlining 8 different issues that are problematic, good and bad. There's some good things. There's some bad things. The one I haven't written is the final one. Where do we go from here? And I'm trying to get some input. I have a person who's promised to give me some input based on some things I've heard her say recently. But we know this. We know what we're doing is not working. We know that.
So far, we haven't.
Yeah. We know there's a flood coming if this economy shakes just a little bit. We know that. The other thing that is problematic is getting into the system.
Yeah.
It is tedious. There's a thing called a VDISPAT that we apparently has to be done. So what we've perfected, and I can say that with some confidence, what we've perfected at the Gateway is the capacity to sift and sort and sift. Who is at that point that they're ready to engage? That's 17, 18, 19%. If collaboratively, we as a community and other communities will sort and sift, and our model works, it's worked since day one. I could go into that if you want to hear it. It's very brief, but I could tell you how we do it.
Yeah.
But we sort and sift. We serve those that are kind of low-hanging fruit that sift down and want to engage. But there has to be other things going on. For instance, our county is one of the only in the top 10 sized counties in our community that doesn't have an affordable housing trust. So our community is gentrifying at a breakneck pace. 78-year-old woman we're dealing with recently, her rent had been $500 a month. For years, she makes right at $800 on SSI, Social Security retirement.
Yeah.
She survived on that extra $300 by going to food banks, getting her clothes at thrift stores and donations. She survived. Well, landlord sold the house. Now the rent's going to $1,200, $1,300.
Yep.
She's homeless. There's nothing she can do.
Yep.
She has no resources. Their social capital is usually spent. So that's what we're seeing. So it's going to require, no doubt, a sorting and sifting with intentionality, laser-focused services on those that sift, collaboration, and a willingness to not just treat symptoms.
Yeah.
That in mind, median rent for a one-bedroom apartment is up to $1,250 in our community. If you have 2 or 3 kids, I can't remember, in our community, the United Way cost estimator predicts you need about $56,000 to live comfortably. Well, the median household income is $54,000. So that means you got a lot of people living below that. Single mothers, single parents, single fathers. That's household income. So usually that means 2 incomes.
And I laugh on the inside when you said that just now. $56,000 to live comfortably in Gaston County?
That's right. Or to live comfortably might not be the right word. To live like without falling through the cracks.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's barely survive. That's barely enough skin to cover the bone.
Right.
I mean, just for instance, on your way out today, if you go down you take a left instead of going down, there's a trailer right here on this corner.
How much
it's got some kids toys in the front. You know, that thing was on the market for 5 years, right? And they finally did one of those predatory, no credit check rent to owns.
Yep.
So basically, they have all responsibility of keeping up with that property.
Yep.
I called up there because I was like, her son needs a place at the time. They were selling that place for $105,000.
And it's a rat trap, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 months later, they raised it to $130,000.
Right.
And then about 6 months after that, I didn't call again, but that family moved in.
Wow.
So I'm assuming that if they didn't change it,
they're probably
paying $1,500-$1,600 a month to stay in a really shitty single wide trailer.
That's
and they've done the best they can with it. Looks good. but it's not worth $1,600, $1,500, $1,300 a month.
That's right. That's right.
It's crazy. So, anyway, I went off on the diatribe there, but
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, like it's
and we're seeing it over and over. So you got to sort and sift. You have to.
Yeah.
You got to collaborate, and you got to be willing to create some better systems that don't exploit the system.
Yeah.
But that work better than the bureaucratic ones we have in place. That means people are going to have to make some changes, and people hate change. I know that, but change is constant, and it's always going to be there. But we're not adapting to it quickly enough as communities. Our system is very simple. If a person hits the gateway and they're not working, we offer them a simple, written on a third grade level survey with 8 or 10 questions that will help us help them.
Yeah.
And get them connected better. If they're struggling financially and working, we have the same kind of thing financially. We just can't get people to take the step and do it. And almost everyone has access to internet and cell phone. Mm-hmm. It's less than 1% of our population. We anecdotally and actuarially, we've been able to prove that.
Oh yeah.
Our library is wonderful to let people utilize the systems there. The library is the last truly free space in America. Anybody can go in there.
Yep.
And thank God our library is helpful. And our library patrons are pretty patient, because the guy sitting next to you at the kiosk may not smell as good as you.
Yeah.
So those are things, but sort and sift, collaborate, and be willing to change some things that must change. The housing first model is the best I've seen. Mm-hmm. You get the person housed so they at least have a place to dry and to keep their things safe.
Yeah. Because
we know theft and loss are problems in the unwalled communities. It's just a reality. Everybody's at survival.
The first 48 makes its nut off of homeless murders.
Right. That's right. And that's one of the things we hear about shelters. Like, I don't want to go to a shelter. There's so much drama there. Well, I understand that. But at the same time, it's all we got. But with 300 and some, 400 roughly homeless people, we have one shelter with 64 beds. Mm-hmm. It's full every night.
Yeah.
And it's a higher barrier shelter. You have to clear a drug tox screen and a background check to get in. 4 of those rooms, of those 64 beds, are family rooms. Mm-hmm. And it is run by the Salvation Army, so technically you have to be married to stay in a family room. They don't always check that. They take people at their word.
I'm sure it's pretty impossible in some situations.
Right. That's right.
Most probably.
And I've seen some movement toward more realistic way of handling that recently. But nonetheless, those are the things. But our sorting and sifting system works. Yeah. And we know that. If people that are listening like to read, there's a guy named Matthew Desmond, who wrote a book called Evicted. Mm-hmm. It's one of the best books at understanding homelessness from the organic viewpoint that I've seen. And it really is I forgot the city it's set in, but he looks at people who are homeless or almost homeless. And some have chosen to live homeless because all they got to do is find a place to sleep and eat. And they're like, I'll make it there. They didn't go out and say, I'm going to be homeless, but they found a comfortable numb. Yeah. And we're like, well, you can do better. Well, yeah, but
sometimes people just don't have it inside of them.
And then you got people who aren't cognitively ready. They're not emotionally ready. We get the mental health piece. We've talked a little bit about that. I spend a lot of time with law enforcement. Over and over, they are telling me, and we can't quantify it, but they estimate, I'll say with no indication of what I think the answer is, I say, what percentage of your calls on a daily basis have a significant mental health component. 85% is usually the first number that comes up.
Yep.
So we got people out there that are carrying stress loads and mental health challenges that we've never fathomed before. And when Reagan closed the mental institutions and said, we'll treat them in the communities, that sounds like a great model. But the funding never followed. It still hasn't followed.
There wasn't
and it's
a plan.
A total cluster now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no plan. It was something to get votes. And he created the welfare queen image, which is not true. It's just not true. But people still are, well, we're not going to give anything to the homeless. We're not going to feed them, or we're not going to give them this because we know they'll abuse it. Well, maybe so.
Abuse is, in a lot of situations, a large contributor to how the unhoused got where they're at.
That's right.
So if you're surprised that it happens once they're in that situation, I don't know what to tell you.
Well,
you know, as a government employee that's talking to me, I would be like, I don't know what to tell you. Well, yeah, they're going to abuse the system. Some of them. Well, but then there's others that's going to help. So what do you want?
And
like,
what
do you want to get two on the road, or you know?
What are we doing about these moguls at the top that are taking tax credits irresponsibly? That they're abusing the system.
Yeah.
Oh, they're creating jobs. Sure, they are, but at what expense?
Yeah.
You know, we have a colleague who interned with us. His story is unbelievable, in that he struggles with a form of schizophrenia and some other mental health challenges. And he's very vocal and open and transparent about it. And he told a group of officers a few months ago, we were talking and doing an activity with him. He said, look, I can fix a lot of my problems short term with a tall boy. Mm-hmm. He said, but that's not the way to do it. Mm-mm. But when my insurance won't get me what I need, or my copay is $1,000 on this drug, or it's experimental, I got to do what I got to do. Mm-hmm. Well, that can lead to substance use disorder, what we used to call addiction, very quickly. Mm-hmm. And you know, one of the things that helped me get a better perspective on this, and again, it ties back to my old way of thinking as a strict religionist, that people were poor because they were lazy. People were poor because they were abused their resources and all that. What helped me was learning from actually Dr. Ruby Payne and Dr. Frank Comer, and even some of Maslow's work, what the core values of the classes are. Mm-hmm. Rich people, truly rich people, if they have money, they want to preserve it.
That's a natural human thing.
Middle class people, they have money, we want to invest it. Mm-hmm. If poor people have money, they want to spend it because they don't get it often. Mm-hmm. That's why you see so many things that middle class people see at tax season. They take food and holiday gifts to a family in December, and then in February they've gotten their taxes back. They see them with wheels on their cars, fancy haircuts, Jordans for their kids. Well, there's a reason for that. The number 1, 2, and 3 priorities and values for people in poverty are survival, mm-hmm. entertainment, and relationships.
Yeah. That's
it. You say, well, that's wrong. It is. It's a scientific reality, a social science. Middle class people want work, achievement, material security.
Yeah, they care about their social standing.
That's
they care about their kids' education. And they care about the future for when they're gone.
That's right.
But people that are struggling on hand-to-mouth
they're
type
surviving.
Thing, they're not sure where Wednesday's meal is going to come from because they had a surprise tire leak today and had to change it.
That's exactly right.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's
a whole different survival.
But the system of care, by and large, is built on middle-class values. Mm-hmm. We're entering the holiday season. We're going to see it this season. Happens every season. I get a call from a church. We want to help people at the holidays, at Christmas. Okay. So they go out and they find all these people who are impoverished, and they get them lavish amounts of gifts. When I used to do this for communities and schools, they would bring the gifts to me. I would take one family's gifts, split them up, and serve 6 families sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's another issue for another day about us imposing American consumerism on people. That's another issue. But the reality is, this Christmas, it will happen. I'll get a call about the 20th of December. And they'll go, Dwayne, how do you help us? I said, what do you mean? They said, we had 80 families set up at a certain time to come get. They had an appointment to come to the church and get their toys. Mm-hmm. And 10 of them didn't show up. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? And they're mad. They're angry. They're like, why? We're giving them. Well, their car might have broken down. Mm-hmm. They were already on 1, needing 2. They could have had to work. They didn't have a choice in it. Mm-hmm. They might not have had enough minutes on their phone to call and figure out who to call. Mm-hmm. Church office might not have been open when they could call. There's all kinds of things. But that is what I call a hand out instead of a hand up.
And charity is hard for people to take in some situations. Other people have no second thought about it. But then there's other people that,
That's right.
It's like they call it, I don't know if it's called this officially, but it's like poor dining.
That's right.
Like where people won't go out to eat because they're like, I'm not going to go in there and buy a salad and soup.
Right. That's right.
And then not leave a tip because I can't afford it, so I'm just not going to go.
Yep. And if you're not going to tip, don't go, Yeah. But we know that. But you're right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And in the Bible we read it's more blessed to give than receive. Mm-hmm. And that's true. It feels great to give people something. But 8 months ago, I got a call from the police department. They said, Dwayne, can you help us? I'm like, what? They said, who's giving away all these clothes on the weekend downtown? Well, there's this just rush of church people who want to do something on the weekend when they're free. So they go to our downtown and they give away meals, sometimes duplicating each other. Well, always, because there's always a place down there that serves every night. Yeah. There are 2, actually. But they give away clothes. They give away food. They load these homeless people up with clothes. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what happens? They don't have anywhere to discard them if they can't wear them. Mm-hmm. So they end up littering the entire downtown. Mm-hmm. City has to send people down there to clean them up on Monday. If we just collaborate and say, all right, you do clothes, you do food, and you do interviews, talk to people, relationship building, and we'll make this work. Instead of everybody coming up with a truck full of clothes, a truck full of food, and a truck full of gospel tracts or whatever. Yeah. So it
needs a reorganization and a refocusing, basically. Yep. So that you get good results.
That's right. And you ask what communities need to do. I don't want to leave that hanging. Yeah. We talked about the sift and sort. We talked about the collaboration. We talked about an intentional reduction of duplication of services. Mm-hmm. The thing that we've found in our community that gets the most traction is when we get a group of interested, concerned people together, either in a single company or a single church or a single house of worship, or preferably a group of different people from different backgrounds, from a faith perspective, community perspective, and all that business perspective, get them together and we conduct what's called why people do what they do. And that's those core values we just talked about. Those open eyes, and people go, now the lights are on. Then they start planning instead of just ready, fire, aim. Yeah. We've got that. And I don't think it's just us, but for me, it's very acute in our community because I've lived there for 30 some years.
That's awesome. So
that's kind of the silhouette view of framework of unhoused and homeless. People equate wealth and poverty with having or not having money, but there's so many other things. You need a social support. You need role models. We need social capital. We need a spiritual hope. Mm-hmm. And I say this every time I teach it. I'm not telling you your spirituality is up to you, but a person who doesn't have hope is the most dangerous person in the world to themselves and to others. Mm-hmm. And that's scary to think how many people are losing hope. And I think about people who didn't have good role models and even didn't have that good command of middle class hidden rules, like the poor person, the impoverished person, not making an appointment. Well, that's not making it to it. That's a middle class value, appointments. We live by appointments. It's not so much in poverty. So not knowing those things. Mm-hmm. And I think about Mike Tyson. Tyson had more money than he could spend, we thought. He didn't have a great command of the language. He struggled. Mm-hmm. We don't know about his mental health, but emotionally, a guy that'll bite somebody's ear off is not emotionally sound. Mm-hmm. And he bit Evander Holyfield's ear off. And Don King and others just came in and sucked him dry. His poverty wasn't financial before that. His poverty was in role models and all that.
Yep.
Then you got a guy like Christopher Reeve, the late Christopher Reeve, who was Superman. He had great command of the language. He was maybe an Oscar winner. I don't remember. He had social support. He had a home. He had money, but he didn't have physical capacity that he normally had. So that made him poor in a sense, impoverished. Yeah. So it's so much more than just not having enough money.
Well, there's poor people that drive Escalades.
Yeah.
And live in $250,000 houses.
Yeah, because they're living on credit.
They have, if one day they don't go to work.
That's right.
They're screwed.
That's right.
And they do that. And they do that until they die.
We have a company in our community that pays really well. But I'm going to tell you, based on the people I know who live there, who drive pickups with $1,700, $1,800 a month payments, if they miss a couple paychecks, they're in trouble. Mm-hmm. They're in trouble, you know. And in today's economy, that's very likely to happen because the economy's pretty good now, but it's not always going to be good. And some of it, I'm not an economist, but some of it seems propped up and just ready to slip. You just never know.
The veneer of a well-organized and happy society is so thin that you can't see it.
Yeah.
So you don't know when it's gone
and
until
don't you
it's
think
gone.
that people are saying to me all the time, why is everybody so angry? Why do we see people in road rage? Why do we see people beating up, at least verbally and orally, on waiters and servers and people like that? We're living with this thin line of sanity almost and stress that people are just ready to pop.
Well, let's use that as a segue over to the depression topic, if you would like.
Let's do it.
What is your thoughts on like fixing this mental health crisis? Because I know we have this homelessness and unhoused crisis.
Right.
It's paired with substance use and abuse. It's almost like a triangle of evil, right? And the other one would be depression or mental health.
Yep.
Right. Now, depression is a specific mental health, but it plays into, I know from my own struggles with depression, it plays into every facet of your life. From your personal relationships with your friends, your work,
your intimacy, everything.
Yeah, sexual function, everything. And I know just from my own struggles with it that it can be almost impossible to hold a job, much less take a bath.
That's right.
Some days.
That's right.
And if you're in a chronic state of that, it has to feed the drug addiction issues and the homelessness issues. So,
I mean, if you can get up and take a couple shots of Jim Beam and function, people would rather do that than lie in the bed and lose their job. And then the dependency can sometimes follow. You're those days where you didn't want to die, but you did not want to keep living the way you were. And I wonder how many people, I was thinking about this yesterday, Ozzy's song, Mama, I'm Coming Home. That was the song that I intended to have playing when I pulled the trigger. I had a plan. I knew where I was going to go. I knew who I was going to ask to be with me because I wanted that person to hurt because that person had hurt me. I had it. I had it all. I had it, the note, everything. Matter of fact, I just deleted the note from my computer files about a year ago because I thought, I'm through this. I think now I may struggle again, but I didn't want my family to someday find that and see such raw pain.
Mm-hmm.
But turns out yesterday I was scrolling, just kind of killing time, and saw Carrie Underwood cover that song on a clip of Howard Stern.
Mm-hmm.
And it moves me with emotions every time I hear it because of the role it was going to play in my life.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people are walking around in their briefcase, on their computer, in their back pocket with a written suicide note and a plan. I just wonder if it's far more than we realize.
I really honestly, sadly, but I tend to agree with you.
Yep. I mean, we don't know, but...
And I think that just that one thing, and there's a million of them, but just that one thing, I think that actually plays a huge role in the day-to-day interactions that people have with each other, whether it be at the grocery store, on Facebook, on Twitter.
Yep.
I think it plays into just the way we think about other people, because that pressure.
How do you think the pressure has multiplied with the explosion of social media outlets and the images we try to build on there, and now artificial outlets through the metaverse? You know, you might have 6 different social media pages, each with a little bit different image.
Mm-hmm.
And now you go in, and instead of being Dean, you can be Joe Smith,
mm-hmm.
the gladiator,
mm-hmm.
or what? And now you've got multiple virtual images. What do you think that's doing to our mental health? And I'm not saying it's bad, but what do you think it's doing? And so we're just ripping people to shreds all the time.
Yeah. Authenticity is a commodity that's not actually authenticity.
That's right.
Is what it is. I think that has to play into it.
Well, and you get a guy like who gets on TV and has 20-some thousand people there. If you just look at him or listen to him casually, you think, man, he's authentic.
Yeah.
But then as you listen with some discernment, you think, this is an act. Mm-hmm. It's all an act. I wonder, and I don't know. I'm not a clinician. I couldn't do it. I don't know. But I wonder what's really in that guy's mind when he lays down at night to go to sleep. Is he really as cheery and bright? I got my doubts. I mean, I really do.
Even if it's not him specifically, I'm sure there's people that are in the same type of situation that when they go to bed at night, the pressure.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever watched it. It's sort of raunchy, but it's a show on HBO called the Gemstones.
The Righteous Gemstones.
The Righteous Gemstones.
I've watched a few clips from it. There's a little bit too much frontal nudity from the men for me.
Okay. I couldn't remember if that was what I was in there. I knew it was a little raunchy, but I think the idea, the message that they're trying to get behind it had a lot of interesting things you could take away.
Yep.
Because it even touches, I know it's a highly comedic project, but as far as the stuff that they do touch on, they touch on stuff like that where, we have an image to uphold, and if we don't do it, then, the whole organization will come down.
It just dominoes down.
Sort of like that documentary, real life documentary they came out with on, I can't remember the name of the people, but it was a husband and his wife, and they got caught in some type of 3-way affair with their pool boy.
Oh, yeah.
And his dad was a super conservative.
Jerry Falwell Jr.
Yeah, that's it. The Falwells.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, even people like that, they get judged immediately, right?
That's right.
But there has to be an aspect of mental health negativity.
Absolutely.
That goes into that in order for them to get to that point. Because
Absolutely.
I know, just from being with church people, that they do actually, at least at one point in their life, believe it and actually want to help people.
That's right.
And they're in it for the right reasons. And then 20 years later, you're watching your wife with the pool boy.
Yeah,
and drinking and having an alcohol problem and everything else.
And when you're trying to live perfectly with no margin for error, as it is in a lot of church settings that I was in, that is exhausting mentally, emotionally, physically, every way. I
turns the church into a greenhouse that grows depression and regret. And
say that again.
Bitterness.
Say that again.
Depression, regret, and bitterness.
I'm gonna write that down. A greenhouse, man.
Turns the church into a greenhouse.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I wouldn't have thought of that.
I'm very visual.
Yeah. I mean, I never would have thought, man. I mean, that's a great way to put it.
I'm very visual. If you can show me, I can usually get it.
But me too. I gotta see it.
I gotta see it work first. And I'm like, oh.
But the church, I'm not. People think when I talk about this that I'm just shutting down the church in my mind. Man, I love the church.
No, you're very active. You were a minister.
Augustine said, the church is a whore, but she's my mother. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I've never been able to find where that was said, but I trust the person who told me that.
It's legit, though.
Yeah.
I mean, how many versions of church do you have?
Oh, millions.
And I'm not trying to be mean.
Right.
But, I mean, if you want to be completely honest and just raw about it.
Yep. You're right.
What is a whore? Anybody you want it to be.
Yeah. Because we call them
you pay them, and they give you the message and tell you what you want to hear.
Right.
Which is what? A lot of church organizations, whether they mean well or not.
That's right.
They curate the message for the audience instead of using the audience to curate a message to the world.
Oh, man, that's powerful.
And
that's powerful.
That's what I see. And I'm a non-religious person myself.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm seeing it from the outside.
You curate the message for the congregation
instead of curating the congregation's message for the world.
Wow.
That's what I see.
I think you've hit it and said it as succinctly as I've heard it said. That's powerful. Man, because that's what happens.
Because people want to be part of something that's doing good.
Yep.
Just naturally.
Yep.
And then if they go to a church, and you see them, churches that are doing good and are pumped up for the community and are actively involved and are doing everything they possibly can.
Yep.
They're exciting. You want to be a part of that.
That's
you
right.
see the church full on Sunday when you drive by.
Their work is relevant.
I'm out riding my motorcycle.
Yeah.
I can tell which churches are pumped up and which ones aren't.
Yep.
The ones, and I know this is not a true metric, but the ones that have graveyards bigger than their auditoriums, it concerns me.
That's right.
If I was someone looking for a church. I wouldn't go to that church.
That's right.
Now that's maybe stupid, but the idea is there.
I think you're onto something. And the churches that are relevant to life. Mm-hmm. And I told the congregation I'm serving right now as an interim, I said, I can love any neighbor of mine, anybody, without sacrificing anything I believe. If I disagree with their whatever, their music or their sexual partner or their living arrangement, that's none of my business.
It isn't.
It's not.
Yeah.
But I remember being in a university that calls itself the world's most unusual university at Bob Jones when I was training. And I remember we were studying the book of Romans with Dr. Richard Hand. This is the greatest book of theology ever written, is that small book of Romans in the Newer Testament of the Bible. We spent days as a class debating this question. We live in an apartment complex. My next door neighbor comes over and wants to borrow glasses, like you drink from, not eyeglasses, wants to borrow glasses because they're having a party and they're serving alcohol. Should we or should we not lend them the glasses? We spent days debating that. Now, you've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. Give them the glasses. Give them the glasses. But it was nuts. But now, 40 years on, I see churches do the same thing. Should we bring people into our congregation who don't look like us? Well, yeah, we should, but we sure don't want them to mess up the pews. Or, well, we brought this group in and we let them use our building, and they had a nice family reunion, and they were not. But I came by church, and they were all outside smoking. Okay, least they didn't light up in the building.
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It just, we've gotten it just wrong.
The small, insignificant stuff has separated us in a lot of situations, even between religions, because, you know, a Methodist church may not have a Catholic,
Right.
you know, someone of the Catholic faith come in and do a sermon.
Right.
Or some sort of, you know, class because of their differences in religion. We both worship the same God, right? If you're both in those churches. It's just
that's been one of the...
Or even have like a Muslim guy come in and give a cultural and religious, familiarization to a Southern Baptist crowd. You're not going to see that.
Well,
not often, anyway.
Years ago, it's been about 12 years ago now, when I was working at the school where Landon attended, I invited the overwhelmingly Christian student body to invite their youth ministers to school for a breakfast and a discussion around how could we partner? How could their churches, their houses of worship, how could they serve the school? How could the school serve them? What can we do, the student body? So come, bring your youth minister, sit with that person, let's talk. We had about 30, 40 people show up. A couple of guys, and I just saw one of them at an event a few weeks ago. I was so proud of him. He was walking around with a scotch and water. I thought maybe he's loosened up a little, but he was an adult now, and he came to me just bent out of the frame. He was in the 8th grade. He'd called his dad. His dad was a minister. He said, "There are Mormons here, youth pastors." I said, "Yeah, that's where Stephanie goes to church."
Yeah.
Well, why are they here? Why are they not? He could not get it. Could not get it. I was kind of glad that he had forgotten it when I bumped into him because he didn't remember it. I'm like, good. But we get so hung up. Mm-hmm. And for me, we've talked more about religion than we have depression. But I'll say this.
Is that telling?
Yeah. Well, for me, religion drove me into depression, among other things.
Yeah, it can.
There's a physical component. There are environmental things with family and all that. Our family, and Dean and I are related, so our family has some deep mental health history.
Yes.
Our grandmother, your great grandmother, spent years institutionalized.
Yep.
My mother, who's still living, obviously is deep in an occult. And if you've seen Shiny Happy People, she's deeply into that. Lived in Bill Gothard's home when he was traveling before his mother died. Our uncle traveled the country. Do you know about him?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Hitchhiking.
Yep. He ended up losing his leg towards the end. And
in and out of mental health.
Alcoholism.
Yeah. In and out of Broughton. His brother was killed in his 40s by his wife for domestic violence. Mm-hmm. She filled him full of lead. His son, the one who was killed, this is unbelievable. And you can call it addiction, but this got to be a mental health component. Mm-hmm. I asked about him at a funeral for our grandmother. I said, "Where is him?" And I called the guy by name because we're just a few years apart in age.
Yeah.
And he had grown up and become a heavy drinker. Yeah. We found out that his former father-in-law, who was a pretty well-known businessman up in the Alexander County area, and of course our cousin was divorced from his daughter now, but he continued to create problems for the family's image.
Yeah.
His ex-father-in-law had him build a fence around his house where our cousin lived. It was a mobile home out in, you've been to it probably, out in the country, and little single wide, and he would keep him in beer and food as long as he stayed in there. Because he got a DWI on a horse one time. So, or a lawnmower, on a lawnmower. So there's all of that mental health challenge in our family. So I'm not just saying religion.
Yeah.
But we went in deep.
Super
deep. And what changed for me was moving from a religion-based life to a relational life with God. But the only way I know how to describe it is to go back to that story in Scripture of Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. When Adam and Eve ate, they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you ate from that, you could determine what was right and wrong and all that.
Make your own rules.
Make your own rules. And that's what we want. We don't want to run the universe, but we want to rule our own world. You know?
Autonomy.
That's right. So whether that story is true or allegorical, it's the message is the same.
Yeah.
But they left the garden, and God puts this flaming angel and won't let them back in. And I thought that was part of their punishment. Well, a friend of mine, I said, I don't understand this. God's supposed to be a God of grace. He said, that's the God of grace at work. I said, what do you mean? He said, if they had gone back into that garden, they had already violated the one tree. Well, there was another one, the tree of life. Mm-hmm. If they had eaten from that tree, they would have been stuck forever surviving on right versus wrong, good and evil. Everything would come down to a sum zero question. But Christ, who's Messiah, as I understand Scripture and believe and have staked my life on, was coming to be Messiah.
Yeah.
And to become my life and your life, and not willing that any should perish, the Bible said. So when I stopped focusing on what was right and wrong and started focusing on knowing God, it made a difference. And the big difference I see is, okay, let's say that Johnny goes out and just ties it on every weekend. He smokes, he drinks, he takes drugs, he's immoral, all that stuff. Well, that's what we call Saturday sin. Okay, that's sin.
There's country songs written about it.
Yes, it's a country song. But what about the guy who's teaching Sunday school, going to church, but goes home and beats the crap out of his wife and kids, or cusses out the server at lunch? The only difference is it's Sunday sin, and it's self-righteousness. Because if I'm meeting the rules, it's wrong.
Yeah. Throw
all that out, and the Bible says, if you love me, keep my commandments. Well, let's love God more.
Yeah.
Love God more, be loved by God more than we can grasp, and that'll flow over into others. And that's what made the difference for me looking down the barrel of a gun. And that's an oversimplification, but that's what did it.
Let me ask you, just out of curiosity, that statement you made just now, it said, if you love me, and God says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Do you think it's just a perspective on how we look at that phrasing, where God says, if you love me first, obeying my commandments is a result of loving me, versus the way I was brought up to think, if you actually love God, you would keep his commandments.
Did you get taught about that you had to commit to love God and you had to commit to follow the commandments?
Well, it was basically your works are an indication of what's in your heart.
Yeah.
And if your outward actions and your words don't match up with what your religious leadership says that it should be in order to be in compliance with our set of rules.
That's right.
Then you're not actually a real deal. You're an imposter.
And every little church has got its own set of written and unwritten rules.
So if you have one thing that you may do or that you struggle with,
that's right.
Then
there are two things that I think illustrate the way I've come to interpret that verse. One is marriage and one is lasagna. Mm-hmm. So let's say you're married.
I love one of those.
Yeah. I'm married. I've been married 39 years in June.
You got the best, man.
Yeah, man, I went way over my head. I don't remain faithful to my marriage vows because they're vows.
Yes.
I don't come home at night and be with my wife because I promised to. I do it because I love her.
Exactly. It's not a hard thing to do.
It is my nature now. Mm-hmm. And Scripture teaches, the way I understand it, that we're given a new nature when we come into Christ. Mm-hmm. But then the other thing, I was just having this discussion this week online, and now I'm going to have coffee with a local pastor. We were talking online. He said, we got to have coffee. And I'm excited because I don't know what his perspectives are. I don't think he's on the same page I am, but that's okay.
Perfectly.
But we're meeting Wednesday. But I was talking in the back and forth about how we focus so much on trying to what I call scaring the hell out of people to get them to get saved.
Scared straight mentality.
Yeah, that's not the model God used.
Yeah.
Christ dealt with the down and out. He dealt with the woman at the well that was basically chattel property in her day. And he loved her. And Paul wrote in Romans, it's God's kindness that brings me to repentance. So I compare it to lasagna. I don't eat lasagna because I have to eat to stay alive.
Yeah.
I don't eat it because if I don't eat something, I will die. I eat it because it's freaking good.
Yeah.
And Scripture says, taste and see that God is good.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be part of something that's good and good for me.
Yeah.
And good for others. So many Christians narrow it down, and I'm sorry, we narrow it down to, I'm not going to hell, it's good for me, but it's not good for others because you treat them like they're infected with something, and if you don't get them saved, you can't have anything to do with them.
They don't have the vaccine, and they're going to...
That's right. It's back to the vaccine.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it right there.
And I met a new person last night. I took the dog out. Person gets out of the car next to me and speaks, and I speak, and I go, hey, are you my new neighbor? Because the house has been for sale. And the young person was like, yeah, I am. I came over, shook her hand, and I said, this is my dog Ivy. I'm Dwayne. My wife Charlotte's inside. And, man, good to have you in the neighborhood. I said, is it just you? Do you have family? She said to me, and she named herself, and my partner, and she named her. And I watched her eyes. She was waiting because she was expecting and anticipating this is either going to go well or the guy's going to get cold. He's going to reject me. Imagine living with that kind of pressure, not just on your sexuality, but on everything in your life and your thought life, because God sees your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. He's Santa Claus.
You dirty little 13-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. That's what I was living under. Mm-hmm. And I refuse to not treat every person I meet with dignity. Yes. I don't care if we sat down here today and the guy next to me worships Satan and the other one worships that hat over there. I'm still going to treat them with dignity.
They're still people.
They're still people. So
with the same emotions and same feelings that you have.
But I couldn't get to there until I got out of a religion mindset and moved to a relational mindset. I couldn't escape that. I remember when I was in corporate, I would go to the headquarters and people would see me in the elevator and they go, what are you doing at headquarters, Mr. Burks? And I went, well, I work for the company. What's your problem? I didn't say that.
Yeah.
But my face said it.
Yeah.
You know, my face said it. And because I was driven. I was thinking, why are you bothering with that kind of question? You got work to do. You know, well, now I don't feel that way. The biggest problem I have now is turning my brain off. Yeah. Because I'm excited.
Well, let me ask you this. But on the mental health front, and this does have a lot to do with that, or it's starting to look like it might.
Right.
We've always had, in the modern pharmaceutical era, answers for one decade and to the next on what can fix depression and mental health issues, or can assist in the healing process. Everything from psychology, narcotics and SSRIs, acupuncture, yoga, everything. One of the things that's really interesting me lately is the work that an organization called MAPS is doing with the federal government, and they're getting research done on psychedelic treatments for drug and alcohol and mental health issues.
Yep.
What if any, are your opinions on how that may play into mental health in the future and, helping people with addictions and depression? What are your thoughts on that approach?
I don't know much about it. Interestingly, I read an article, I think in the New York Times last Sunday, about a mushroom that is being studied and tested to help with mental health. My perspective on it, I'm not a mental health clinician. I'm not an expert in that.
Oh, yeah.
But my story is this. when I was at the height of my depression, my wife was afraid to leave me at home alone. Those few days, especially then. I had tried and tried and tried to break through. I'd tried everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlotte convinced me to let her call a friend of mine who runs a counseling center and see if he would talk to me. Because we were friends. He had never been my counselor. And colleagues.
Yeah.
Well, he agreed, let's have lunch. So I drove to Charlotte, had lunch with him, and he said, Dwayne, I know your story. He said, you've tried the physical things, you've exercised, you've tried the spiritual things, you've done it, you've tried the emotional things, you've had counseling. He said, what is the physical piece about this that you don't know? Well, I'd been taught that every problem was a spiritual problem.
Mm-hmm.
So if I got my spiritual life right, my mental health would fall into place.
Yeah.
And he said, Dwayne, I'm begging you. He said, tell me you'll go see your doctor today. So I did. Dr. Aiken just retired a couple years ago. I wrote him a letter and thanked him for this, actually, when he retired. And Dr. Aiken said, Dwayne, with what you're telling me, I should involuntarily commit you.
Mm-hmm.
He said, if you'll take this Effexor, if you'll take it and give me your word, because I know you'll honor your word. He said, I want you to go home, but I want you to call me tomorrow and the next day and let me know what's going on. I took it home. It was like swallowing a Volkswagen the first time I took it. But what happened was within a few days, it began to work, week or so, maybe 5 days. And I looked around, I thought, so this is what normal feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Then I could feel some of the things that I had been masking by stuffing them down. And then the process of unloading that started. I know there is a role for pharmaceuticals in mental health. What I don't know is how deep it is because it depends on each person's situation. I, to this day, take Effexor.
Yeah.
And my wife can tell if I miss it. She can tell. She said, "You take your medicine." And some people, would say, "Well, okay, that's just it's my situation." But it has gotten easier to live through the problems that life throws at us with a better spiritual, emotional, physical, and mindset.
Yeah.
With medicine. There's a lot of brands of Christianity that are out there. Jesus just take care of everything. You won't have any problems. Look, you will have problems.
What's that old song from back in the day? One of the very first Christian rock songs. It says something about smoking cigarettes and yellow fingers. And it says, why don't you try Jesus? He's got the answer.
Yeah. And
it's a catchy song, too.
That's what bugs me about those signs. Jesus is the answer.
Yeah.
Well, whose version of Jesus?
Yeah.
Your version or
that
the true
in itself
version?
will give you anxiety.
That's right.
Imagine
you
standing there on the corner and there's 12 churches in front of you. Which one do I go to?
Which one do I go to? That's right.
Yeah, and each one's a different denomination.
Yeah.
And even within the denomination, you got,
various versions of that.
I mean, I'm often intimidated a little bit to tell people that my credentials are Baptist because we have such a bad reputation. And I was going to change to American Baptist, which is much smaller group, much more progressive in its way of thinking and conducting itself. But this was about 8 years ago, and my friend, who's a Catholic, man, he loves Jesus. I love the guy. He's 90 years old now. He had been on a trip somewhere, and he brought me home this little plastic icon of a cross. And I said, why do you have that? Why'd you bring it to me? He said, I don't know. God told me to get it for you. Mm-hmm. He said, here's the story on it. He said, this is an icon representing the cross before which St. Francis prayed when he felt God said to him, fix my church.
Yeah.
Francis gets up and begins to do hammer and nails types things. He's back praying the next time, and the Holy Spirit seemed to say to him, no, I mean, fix my church. Love it. Help it heal others. It's gotten regimented. So Francis never, it's what he went back and did.
Yeah.
And became canonized for that. For me, that settled it. God didn't want me, I believe, to just pull out, but to fix, for lack of a better word, by leading in different directions. And I didn't know what that meant. I was in this small church doing bivocational work, working in the community. I didn't know what it meant. And now God has put me, I believe, positioned me in a church that has the potential to lead again. It's what's called a big steeple church. There are little steeple churches like you see in the country and on the edge of town. Then there are the big steeples, the First Methodist, the First Baptist. Well, I'm in a First Baptist church that's the biggest steeple in Gaston County. It's huge.
Oh yeah, I mean,
But,
I mean, it's a beautiful building too. I mean, it's
but
nice.
they're out of people. So our plan, our desire is to lead in a role that doesn't devalue what we believe about Scripture, but that values people the way God values people. Will it happen quickly? Not short of a miracle. But if it happens slowly, as long as it happens, I'm happy.
Yeah.
You know. So I think that might have been where God was leading me, and I didn't know it. But there were days that I never imagined I would get to 60 years old.
Yeah.
The other thing that happened that I don't know if this would have affected you as a grandson the way it did your mom and me, but I know it affected us. Our dad died from the same disease we have, type 1 childhood diabetes. Real diabetes is what I call it, not Wilford Brimley diabetes. The real deal.
Not elective.
Yeah, and I'm joking, but at the same time,
I get it.
somebody asked me the other day, you still got that diabetes? David got over his. Well, yeah, the guy did because he had type 2.
Yeah.
Mine, there's no getting over it. That being said, Dad died at 36 years old. I was 17. Your mom was 10 or 11. She was 11. I believed with all my being that I would die before I reached 37.
Yeah.
So you take all that religious pressure I had, the fact that I'm a type A person anyway, and then you try to stuff in a 75, 80-year life into 35 years, it about killed me.
Yeah.
It about killed me.
That overloads your brain
Yeah.
and your mind and your heart.
It overloaded everything. And
Yeah.
I didn't, thankfully I never struggled with substance use challenges, probably because I was diabetic. I was afraid if I got drunk or if I used drugs, I wouldn't know if my blood sugar dropped.
Yeah.
And I would die. So that protected me from it.
Yeah.
Even when my religion lessened on me and I wasn't so afraid of going to hell for it.
Yeah.
You know, but I think that's been a good thing because I'm not compulsive, but when I get my teeth in something, I want to see it through.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of my story. Man, it's so much broader. I've written a book about it. It's really a booklet. And it's written from my faith perspective, of course.
Yeah.
But it's available if anybody wants it. I think it's on Amazon. And I would say this about our Gateway. I mentioned it in the other podcast. I operate and have founded the Gateway Gaston. It's gatewaygaston.org. If someone comes to that site and needs connection to a human service agency of any kind, we help them connect. We have instructed our people who staff that, volunteers and professional, that if a veteran or a law enforcement especially hits that desiring mental health support, to elevate that to as fast as we can get to it. We really feel that way about any mental health support, but especially those two entities.
Yeah.
At breakfast this morning, Landon and I were talking to a Marine who's now out of the Marines. I don't know why he chose to tell us this, but he watched one of his colleagues while they were in basic take an M16 to himself. Another guy hung himself, and he found the body. And he said that at one point, until his sister came and got him from where he was living in another state and brought him back here to North Carolina, he was ready to do the same.
I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
So our veterans and then our law enforcement and our community, We had a situation this past week where 11-year-old twins and their father were burned in a fire set by the abusive father. The one twin died, the 11 years old, the boy. The man died. The little girl's in the burn center. We have law enforcement officers who go out and walk up on that and have to deal with it, have to photograph it. I don't know what kind of mental health supports they're getting. So we want to be there for those two groups especially.
I want to say from someone in that veteran community, I appreciate what you're doing and that you're making that a part of your program.
And we don't care if they're in Gaston County or not for that. We're gonna get
phone
back
call
to
stuff. Yeah, you can definitely talk somebody down. I've been in the exact same situation.
Yeah.
I was at work one day and I had a buddy that had deployed with me, and he called me or had texted me something strange, and I called him immediately, and I ended up pulling over just when I drove truck. And just stayed on the phone with him until the mental health professionals got there to his door.
Wow.
It was about 3.5 hours.
So were you in your home community when that happened?
He was actually in the central North Carolina area.
So how did you know who to call to get a team out there?
I called the local police department.
Yep.
And I said, I have a veteran that's going through a mental health crisis. He's on the verge of committing self-harm or suicide.
Yep.
I said, and I want to let you know that if you go out there and you use any aggression, it could end his life.
Right.
So do not come out there with police, SWAT, and guns. Now, I don't know if they actually came out with that, but the guy that was on the phone with me sounded like a reasonable dude.
Right.
Well, it's one of those things where it is one phone call.
One call.
If they make that decision, that may be all you got.
That's right. And if they reach out, they're at least thinking about not doing it.
Yes.
You know, it's the ones you don't hear from that scare me to death. That, you know, how many car accidents are just cloaked suicides? How many overdoses are intentional but look accidental? You just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know. So,
I've had friends that were, I mean, it touches everybody.
Yep.
It does. So
everybody.
I commend your work on all these fronts.
Thank you, man.
And just from me to you, I always will have said, and I will continue to say, I appreciate the way you have consistently, which is hard to do, shown love and acceptance to not just your own family, but the people around you, your extended family.
Yep.
And that's something that is rare.
Yeah.
And I know that at any time, I've always been able to call you or, you know, Aunt Charlotte, and you pick up the phone and you won't judge me.
Right.
So that in itself does more than you will ever understand for not just me, but I'm sure for other people too. So the work you're doing is just a extension of that.
Yeah, it's why it doesn't feel like work, I guess.
And I want to say that same feeling I have and appreciation I have, I know is what other people are feeling.
Yep.
So keep it up.
Well, I'll close with this story.
Take care of yourself.
It's so cool. This week, we got a hit for a lady out of county, double amputee, homeless. Mm-hmm. She was out of county. We didn't have any resources for her. We didn't know. Yeah. But she came to me through one of our people that we've contracted to do some work with us at one time. And I knew the situation had been vetted as much as it needed to be.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, here's what we might be able to do. Will it work? And the caseworker that was helping her worked on it, emailed me back. She said, yeah, we can make that work. I said, all right, we'll get $150. I didn't know how we were going to get it or where we were going to get it. That was 8 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. 9:30, I think it was. I get a message from a lady who says, you helped me several years ago. She was working in an adult establishment. She's tried to get out. She can't make enough money. She's still working in that world. God bless her. Mm-hmm. But she's got a family. She's got a husband that you can tell she loves him. He loves her. They love their kids. But she said, you guys helped me. I want to give back. What can I do? I sent her the link, $200.
Nice.
Within 2 hours of not knowing where we were going to get it. That is what keeps you going and thinking this is making a difference.
You said and just make sure I get this correct. You said a person that was in sex work donated.
Yeah, they worked in a club.
Yeah.
Okay.
As an entertainer.
Okay, an adult entertainer.
Adult entertainer.
Okay, that's still awesome.
Yeah, and tried to leave, but
But I mean that even those people that the church may not think about as helping can help and are willing and are a resource, regardless of their profession.
I say it often. I long for the day that people come into church and don't know they're not supposed to light up.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're really being the church. But we got a long way to go in religion to do that. But that's my goal.
Well, you're also working on that front. So congratulations on all the success that you've had.
Trying to be consistent, trying to be able to support things that I know are true and not stick my nose in where I don't know. Yeah. But I'm getting older, so I've seen some things. So, oh man, thank you, man.
No, thank you, and I appreciate it, and best of luck, and thank you, young man, for coming up today and contributing as well. Thank you, sir.
All right.